Hey, David Brewster here with Three for All, and this is three Bruce Bouillet licks from 1988. And I guess the first thing I should teach everybody, if you don't already know, is the correct way to pronounce his last name. It's not Bouillet, and it's definitely not Boulette. It's Bouillet, and it's French, so don't pronounce the L's. But if you're not familiar with who Bruce is, he's definitely an underground kind of cult, shred guitar legend. And he definitely rose to popularity with the band Racer X, playing alongside Paul Gilbert. And if you're not familiar with Racer X, I highly recommend, if you love shred guitar and technical guitar playing, 80s rock guitar, definitely check out Racer X. I mean, they're definitely, kind of a misunderstood and almost forgotten, LA, shred band. I mean, aside from the fact you've got Paul Gilbert, at the helm, kind of like Captain Kirk or something. You've got Paul Gilbert, Bruce Bouillet, John Alderetti, Scott Travis on drums, who went on to play with Judas Priest. John went on to play with Mars Volta, after Racer X, and also Jeff Martin, a respected singer and drummer, and he's worked with a bunch of people. So if you're not really familiar with Bruce or the music from Racer X, Bruce appears on Second Heat, and he also appears on Extreme Volume 1 and Extreme Volume 2. And he's released, a couple solo albums. He worked with the band The Scream, which had John Corabi on vocals right before he left to go sing with Motley Crue. And the Let It Scream album is killer. Outlaw and Man in the Moon and some of those songs. I mean, that's a very kind of forgotten, kick-ass, rock guitar album. So check out The Scream if you haven't. And also Bruce's 2013 album, The Order of Control. If you love, instrumental like shred rock guitar, The Order of Control is awesome. And a lot of people don't even realize it's out there. But I think I found it on iTunes, and it's, kind of sitting on my computer. Killer album, though. It'll melt your face for sure. I have seen Bruce in concert. That was in 2007 at the G3 in Nashville, Tennessee at the Ryman. And it was Joe Satriani, Paul Gilbert, and John Petrucci. And Bruce played with Paul. So it was awesome to kind of see like a little, Racer X reunion. They played Skit Skat Wah, and they played a bunch of stuff. And one of my students was actually there too, Justin Smith. And Justin and I, were working together, and I was giving him lessons. And then in this lesson, we talked about, they played Skit Skat Wah. We were so excited. And they sounded killer. It was great to see Bruce play, and of course to see Paul again. And yeah, great show. That was awesome. G3, those are great tours too. The licks I selected for this lesson technically come from Extreme Volume 1, and on that album you'll hear Bruce's solo, which that's what it's called. And, Bruce's solo on that album is killer. No offense to Paul Gilbert, I'm a huge Paul Gilbert fan, but Bruce's solo smokes Paul Gilbert's. Gilbert's is great, he's shredding like a madman, he kicks on a harmonizer. He kind of loses me, somewhere around the harmonizer part. But Bruce's solo just comes out, I mean, he is just terrifying. So if you've never heard it, or if you haven't heard Extreme Volume 1 or 2, check them out because they will blow you away. I mean, sweeping and just hyperactive guitar playing everywhere. So the licks I selected technically appear on that album, but when I looked for it online, there isn't really a video that accompanies that performance. But I did locate another kind of bootleg of Bruce playing a solo. A couple of these licks appeared, in that solo. There's one that's missing from the video, but anyway, we're going to jump into some of these licks so you can see the clips that I selected, but definitely check out Extreme Volume 1's Bruce's solo. It'll blow you away. The first lick from the solo is actually kind of a sweep arpeggio, and this is honestly my favorite lick from the entire solo. I probably should have saved this for the last lick, but whatever. It's killer, and I know the first time I ever heard Bruce's solo, this lick just grabbed my attention. I was like, what in the world was that? And it's really interesting. So Bruce's solo, it kind of drifts around, he's flirting with different types of D tonalities and G, and there's a little bit of B minor. Eventually it ends like on this kind of E blues, jam. But I guess you could technically think of this as kind of Mixolydian flat 6, which is a mode from the melodic minor scale. And you know, it has a very, very strong classical, you know, kind of influence. So it sounds like this. Right there in the beginning, you can hear we're basically playing a D major arpeggio, sweeped, like that. And if you have trouble with that arpeggio, I do have kind of a suggestion that might help you get used to doing that, because you're basically going to do a downstroke sweep, and then there's a pull off, and then he's grabbing that D note. Well, he grabs the pull off with F sharp, grabs the D, and then goes back to that A note again. Something like that. So if you have trouble with that sweep, one thing you can actually practice, which might seem kind of silly, but it really helped me get used to sweeping, is think of like the theme of Woody Woodpecker, you know, like the old cartoon or whatever, and mimic his laugh. And it's the same arpeggio. The only difference is we're going to add an F sharp right there for Bruce's solo. You know, and it's phrased a little bit differently than Woody Woodpecker, but it's very similar, you know, in the sound. And then right there, he basically comes down that arpeggio and then shifts up one fret. So he's, you know, basically targeting this B flat, which is really cool. And then basically right there, he goes right back down to that D major. And then he basically starts sliding down. And I really love the way he ends that phrase too. So good. The next lick is actually the very next lick in the solo, and it's this really cool D major 7 arpeggio. And he basically, you know, at the end of that previous phrase, you know, he kind of ended with that D octave right there. And then he basically grabs A and then shifts that up to D, and then he begins this little arpeggio, which is so cool. Something like that. So slowly. And right there you can see, you know, we're basically playing a D major 7 arpeggio right there. And you can kind of think of that almost like a chord. So he basically goes up that arpeggio and then comes right back down the same way. Which is so good. The next lick, actually it begins the little blues jam. It's kind of a shred blues, really, but if you haven't heard the solo, Bruce just kills the entire time. But if you're curious what bluesy shred or shreddy blues, you know, sounds like, check out that part of the solo, because I know Yngwie also had kind of a blues jam in his Live in Leningrad solo, and that's phenomenal. You know, I think he also did like Spanish Castle Magic in there too. But Bruce, I don't know, there's just like this energy. He is sweeping and shredding through, you know, some blues changes, but then there's also like some really authentic, you know, blues moments, you know, and licks in there too. Such a cool solo. But this, it kind of shifted to E7. And he's kind of playing out of the Mixolydian Pentatonic box right here. This. But he basically starts off, and actually it's a lick that I caught John Petrucci playing, but John was playing it, you know, several years after Racer X, so maybe he stole this from Bruce. I have no idea. he's kind of doing that, you know, released bend, but it's, you know, kind of quickly doing some hammer-ons and pull-offs in there. And there you can see he's basically doing that rapid-fire bending lick. And then he starts doing this little pull-off pattern where he's kind of creating, you know, some passing tones and just kind of mixing the notes around there. You know, something like that. It's such a cool lick. Such a cool lick. So here's a bonus lick from the solo, and it doesn't appear on the video clip that I kind of chopped up for this episode, but it does appear on Extreme Volume 1. So I liked it so much, I just decided to kind of throw it in here. So I don't have the video clip for this because it doesn't really exist, but you can hear it on their live album. So really what he's doing here, it's using secondary dominance, which is very common, especially in classical music, but you can hear this filter into rock and jazz and some other styles of music too. So technically, secondary dominance is when you have a key and you're basically targeting, you know, a certain chord in the progression, but instead of playing it the way it should be, you know, if in a traditional key or a harmonized scale, you're basically changing it to a dominant 7th chord. So the progression, you know, has this kind of slinky movement where we're basically moving from G here to, you know, E7, and then we're going to move to A, and then F sharp 7. So you can hear this kind of stepwise movement, you know, from the G to E7, and then the A to F sharp 7, and then more than likely you could resolve that, you know, with B minor there at the end. But you can hear that pull. It looks and sounds like this. And you can see there we're basically targeting, you know, G major. And then E7. And then A major. And then F sharp 7. So those string skipping shapes are a little bit different than the kind of traditional, you know, Paul Gilbert or Nuno Betancourt shape, which I did recently target those in the breaking chords, you know, string skipping arpeggios lesson. So it's a different shape than that, but I really like the way it kind of rolls and moves around. You're definitely going to have to kind of roll your fingers, you know, like the pinky right there, to grab the B and then grab that E at the end, like this. Yeah, right there. And then do the same thing right here. It's a really cool arpeggio. Alright, that's going to wrap this look at 3 licks from Bruce Bouillet, and definitely, you know, if you're a shred, you know, fan, technical guitar fan, 80s rock guitar fan, progressive rock fan, I mean, really, Racer X covered a lot of bases. I mean, they had this just insane, you know, shred guitar approach, but then they would also turn around and do things like play a cover of, say, like Detroit Rock City, and they would play the harmony solo, you know, with their teeth, which is insane. You don't see Paul Stanley or anybody, you know, playing that solo, you know, with their teeth, but Racer X did. So they had this just hyperactive shred, but then they would play like classic rock and some other stuff too. And you could hear like classical and rock and all this crazy stuff. So if you're not really hip to Racer X, run, you know, to your nearest record store or just hop online and, you know, pick up some Racer X albums, because any of their albums are great. But definitely I'm a big fan of both the live albums. I think, you know, some people aren't really, you know, fans of live music or live albums, but Extreme Volume 1 and 2 are phenomenal, you know, off the charts, you know, in my opinion. And barely anybody out there even knows they exist or even knows who Racer X is or was. But anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Hopefully you got something from this lesson. Definitely check out Bruce Bouillet. and I'll be back before you know it with more lessons and material. Thank you.